If people don't feel safe coming to you, it doesn't matter how knowledgeable you are or how skilled you are at the function that you are a leader over, you're never going to know the real root of problems until it's too late. And if you are a person that is in an HR function, if people, you can't claim to be people first if the people you work with see you more as a risk than as a resource. Look, if it's very simple. If employees do not feel safe going to HR, you don't have HR, you just have on-site surveillance. Welcome to the second episode of Let's Be Real, Reframing Leadership and Reclaiming HR. If you've not checked out the first episode, I really encourage you to take a listen where we talk about how HR finds its powerlessness and how to gain it back. In today's episode, we're going to talk about how to be a safe HR leader and why safety is the currency that makes everything else within an operating organization possible. I feel the importance to say while this episode is tailored specifically to HR professionals, it is still not just exclusive to those that are in the HR function. It's definitely applicable to all leaders within the organization. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoy. Every leader, regardless of their title, their industry, their experience, they have a methodology. They have an ideal leadership style. And for me, I always wanted to be a safe person, a safe leader, someone where other people felt like they could just be real with me. And being safe, like, so what does safe mean? We hear like psychological safety a lot as buzzwords, or even in like educational settings, that you have to have a psychologically safe workplace. And I agree with that. I think that's important. But let's talk about what safety means in the context of a characteristic trait for a leader. Safe does not mean soft, and it definitely does not mean, oh, I can always go to this person and get the yes that I need. That's not safe at all. Safe means, in my terms, predictable in your integrity. It means that when someone comes to you, that they are 9 times out of 10 going to know most likely what your reaction is going to be to their request. And I will take like a quote that I used to say in a previous experience is I would say, you can fix a jerk who knows they're a jerk, but you can't fix a jerk who doesn't know they're a jerk. Now, contextually, that comment was talking to or speaking to self-awareness, but it applies to safety as well, because a person has to know themselves, which we'll talk about that a little bit more in this podcast and discussion. But if you know yourself well enough to how you can react, other people are going to sense and they're going to see and experience that as well. And sticking with that jerk analogy, even if someone is a jerk, they're at least predictable. Like, I have worked with some individuals that were not very nice, and I knew what I could say and what I couldn't say. And in a way, that was more safe than someone that was a proverbial ticking time bomb. So it's about being predictable and consistent in your integrity. The second part to being predictable is people are able to bring hard truths to you, and they can do so without fear of retaliation, without fear of gossip, and without fear of being dismissed. And that's more than just being dismissed in the traditional you're fired sense, but it's dismissed in the sense of, I will be ignored. I will not be like, they're not going to engage with me in this conversation, or it's just, there's no way that's true. People will stop coming to you for that reason. Your role is to be a vault. It's to be a vault that's steady. People know the code. They know that what is in it. There's inventory. There's a, again, level of predictability. It is not meant to be a megaphone for leadership optics, or not meant to be this under the table secret back talker, not back talker, behind the back talker to leaders where you run and just gossip about what's being said. But I want to talk more about what it means to engage with someone when they come to you with something. And honestly, it's asking questions, but it's about asking questions in a way where you're not already coming to a conclusion. Be curious, don't be conclusive. If you are automatically conclusive about what another person is saying, then you're showing them that you're coming already to this predetermined judgment that's going to cause them to be closed off. So ask. And sometimes it's as simple as restating what you have heard and clarifying with them to make sure, am I understanding you correctly? And I always like asking, what sort of outcomes do you want from this? And you can preface it in a way where you're saying, look, I'm not promising anything. And I'm also not trying to come across as dismissive. I'm just trying to see how we find resolve here because it's bothering you enough to have a conversation with me. And I'm thankful that you did. And I'm honestly honored that you trust me with this because it's heavy. It's heavy. Even if you think it's light as listener, it's still heavy for them based off of their perspective. Affirm them in that, validate them, but ask how we can find resolve so they're not carrying around this burden. And sometimes employees come to you with things that has to be acted on and they're not going to like it, but if you consistently and equitably act on information that has common themes, it can be respected and you're still seen as safe. Being a safe leader does not mean easy, but what it does mean is that employees trust you and they trust that what they share with you will not be used against them, will not be used against them as any sort of weapon. So why do unsafe leaders in HR fail? I debated whether or not to go through characteristic traits of unsafe leaders, and I'm not even going to give that the time of day because I want to give spotlight to traits, characteristics of safe leaders, and you can just do the critical thinking yourself to take a look at the what conflicts or the antonyms rather of these traits to determine what's an unsafe leader. Look, it's very simple. Unsafe HR leaders fail because once trust is gone, employees, they go silent. And once employees go silent, problems, they can't be fixed until they are loud, visible, and impactful. There's no longer prevention, it's reactive responses. That's a whole lot more messy with a lot more collateral than just preventing it in the first place. Prevention builds trust. Reactions build not only disloyalty, it also harbors resentment because it's like, why did you not do something about this in the first place? So many unsafe HR leaders, though, here's what makes this complex is that many unsafe HR leaders, they're not malicious. They're just too close and enmeshed with leadership's agenda. And you have to have a healthy separation, a degree of separation rather, from that agenda and have boundaries, have established boundaries. And look, I said this a second ago, but when employees go silent, the damage doesn't disappear. It doesn't go anywhere. It just gets buried until it costs you nearly everything. So how do we take the real method and we take those traits of being a safe HR leader and take the real method and lay it out? Let's map it out on how to be a safe HR leader. First is resonance. Show up without an agenda. Walk the floor, ask questions, be present in the small moments, and get to know people. Whenever I was at the hotel, I did this daily, and it was my most favorite aspect of the job. I did it 3 to 4 times a day. I didn't have any purpose. I wasn't going around trying to figure out whether or not someone had turned in their benefit paperwork or if they'd received their ADP pay card. I was just trying to build relationships. That is the moment. Like in those moments is where I learned whether or not someone had a grandchild on the way. It's where I learned whether or not someone had just joined a band and they were going to go on tour in a few months. It's where I learned that a person was saving up to buy their first home. And that is where we were able to build community, build connection, and build relationship resonance with one another. So that's the R. Build relationships by walking around, engaging with people with no agenda other than just getting to know them. Resonance. E, empowerment. This is about protecting employees' voices when it's inconvenient for leadership. Oh, and it definitely was not convenient for me, but I did this on more times than I could count in speaking up for ways in which decisions were impacting the employee, whether it be about parking passes, the cost of such, or whether it be about whether or not the rally that we'd had monthly, what time it should be held, and whether there was a disparate impact to the time in terms of involvement for other employees, even about lunches, like how they were delivered and the ways in which it was nasty because it just sat out in a to-go container all day for those that were working weekends or evening shift. It was being an employee's advocate in rooms, because having that seat as HR is a privilege. And it's not a privilege because we're special. It's a privilege because it's an opportunity to be an advocate for people. And when it drives me crazy when HR professionals have a seat and don't use it to advocate for employees, and they use it as a way to continue to just pad the egos of, again, leadership's agenda. So, agency. So we talked about resonance and empowerment. Agency. This is holding the line of that boundary so that you're not continuously, just stroking the egos of leaders. You're holding the line, advocating for employees, but you're also making sure that you maintain confidentiality and that you're not compromising anyone's trust, even when you're pressured to do so, which happens behind closed doors. Leverage. Use trust to open doors for tougher conversations and systemic change. This one is tough, and in my second opportunity, I was able to change the culture in a way that was not healthy. That resulted in my departure, but there was change, and I'll debate anyone on that. There was change, and I'm not going to unpack that any further. But at the hotel, we were able to build trust with one another to have difficult conversations. And I had some really difficult conversations, ones that sometimes resulted in tears, ones that resulted in a lot of resentment, but it wasn't coming from a place of egos or coming from a place of preference. It was about putting people first. And I said a word there that I want to recircle back to. There was some resentment, but it always led to some sort of resolve, because we were able to resolve the issue and to put the resentment behind, because we knew, all parties, we knew that our focus was not about our own professional advancement or about our own personal gain. It was about people. And that's what is so important about culture and about having a people first mentality over this compliance based bull. I can't stand it, and I can't stand cowardice either. But that's a podcast for another day. So let's also so here's the deal. Like, your job is to be leaders' informant, but your job is also to be the bridge between truth and change. That is HR, truth and change. You are the bridge. What are some non-negotiables of being a safe leader? Is that you cannot retaliate, whether that be directly or indirectly. And I can remember in my experience, if there was ever anything in terms of an action that I did or an action that I recommended or took that I felt like there could be any sort of collateral damage, I went to the person and explained to them exactly what I was doing. Now, I'm sure there were instances where I forgot, not intentionally, or messed up, but it was always my intent to make sure that parties were not surprised and that there was communication as to why a decision was being made. And two, you should never use an employee's confidence as a political weapon. Just dangling that fish and saying, hey, I can't tell this because da 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 da. What's the point? What's the point in continuing to say, I really wish I could tell because it's, I can't, because I have to maintain confidentiality. I mean, when someone would ask me a question that it was privileged information, I had a way of shaming them, and not in a way that was to embarrass them, but it was a way of letting them know that's just a question you don't ask. And what's the relevancy? Like, what is the relevancy of, we have 7 complaints. I'll use this as a scenario. We have 7 complaints about the length of time that it takes for the time clocks to work. And anytime a leader would say, well, who said that? What is the relevance of asking the question? One, are you trying to corroborate my credibility by seeing if I can name, therefore there's legitimacy? Like, do you think I'm just making up the number? Or two, are you trying to corroborate the legitimacy of the complaints by your assessment of the person that's making the complaint? There's no relevancy to it. If I'm in a position where I'm trusted to be the bridge between change and truth, then you need to take me at my word, but also understand that I have the obligation to maintain confidentiality for those that come to me to make a change. It's that simple. This is one that also HR leaders forget about, and I've not been perfect in this. And I shared previously an example, but I tried I was very intentional in closing the door whenever someone came to me with something big or small. When someone comes to you with an issue, even if there isn't good news, you still go to the person. You go to the person and you say, here's how it landed. Here was the conclusion of it. Because what you're building is trust, and you're building the behavior that you may not be associated with always getting things done in their perspective, especially if you've gone to them a couple times and said, I'm sorry, leadership's direction is not to go in that way. But you are building credibility that you're a person that follows up and that you listened and you took action. And that is where respect and trust, and again, being a safe leader is earned, not just being a yes person. Follow up is where safety becomes real. If a person trusts you with a problem, don't disappear. Safety is your credibility in the workplace. Your ability to be a safe leader is your credibility. And when without it, nothing else really matters, especially for an HR leader. Every letter, if you take a look back at the real method, resonance, empowerment, agency, and leverage, every aspect of being real with people, every aspect of it collapses without safety, without being a person that employees within your organization trust. It is just, it's gone. It collapses. I know I keep saying this, but it's important for you to hear that you cannot be real with the person if you're not safe with the person. So look, if you're ready to become a safe HR leader, take a look at the Reclaimed HR Guide that is in the bio or in the summary description of this podcast. It's full of ways that you can reclaim the function and build trust and authority without waiting for permission from someone else within the organization. And don't forget to subscribe weekly to this podcast for no BS leadership and HR truth. And remember, if employees cannot trust you, they will never tell you what you most need to hear. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Let's Be Real. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join the journey where we talk about how we can reframe leadership and reclaim HR. Make it a good one.